Hello, my name is Júlio Santos, and I'm the technical co-founder at Fractal. We're hard at work building the Fractal Protocol, which will enable radical markets for data and help keep the web open and free for everyone. Joining me today is Brian Cox. He's the general manager at MAZDA and the blockchain trailblazer at Kochava. And Kochava is a leading data management platform. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the blockchain space?
Thanks, Julia. Thanks for having me. So for sure, I have, I think, a very varied background and interesting background that I've landed in ad tech. I've really been running businesses across different verticals, from forest products companies to aerospace engineering. And I became interested in blockchain really as a solution technology more than like an investment opportunity. For me, it was less about the coin and the investments around coins, but instead I really saw something that was that could disrupt different supply chains across various industries. And so a few years ago, I joined Kochava specifically to push forward our business around MAZDA, which is our internal DLT solution.
All right. Got it. Thank you. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Azeroth, but also about Exchange, the bigger context in which Azeroth is included. So that is a project that I remember from way back in 2017 during the last crypto summer, because I was just very impressed that an established company like Kochava was exploring a technology that, especially at the time, was still quite controversial. Could you walk us through the story of that project so far and kind of like what to expect in the future?
Yeah. Well, Kochava, as you mentioned, Kochava has its roots in being an industry leader and really a technology leader in the omni-channel measurement and attribution ecosystem. We're one of only 5 Facebook measurement partners in the world, and we measure everything from footfall traffic to out-of-home billboards and cross-screen signal for OTT and CTV. And the digital advertising industry is $300 billion annually and growing. And it's crazy to think like an industry this large still struggles with fraudulent signals and bad actors.
Yeah.
And it's largely because of the opacity in the supply chain, right? And the digital advertising industry. The ecosystem is splintered. It's made up of all these various companies that provide monetization, buying, optimization, and planning. But there's never been this like open marketplace for it to function. Kochava has always been on the forefront of detecting and identifying and preventing fraud with our solution set. And we see blockchain as a solution that not only solves for fraud, but it improves several of these components around buying and selling of digital media. So to that end, a few years ago, we determined this huge opportunity to improve buying and selling digital advertising by building a protocol out on blockchain. So we set out to benchmark, existing blockchain platforms, comparing cost, performance, security, other governance capabilities. And what we learned is that there just isn't a blockchain platform out there that can handle the speed and extensibility and transactional volumes necessary to facilitate this digital advertising ecosystem. So we built our own, right? That's the origin story of MAZDA. Now we've completed that build out. We're taking MAZDA to market. And it's really something that we're going to take to market across many verticals. But internally now, we get to turn our resources back to Exchange and really go to build this protocol out on top of MAZDA.
All right, got it. Thank you. There's a comment that I have on your white paper. Like for me, one of the most striking aspects of it is how you treat like digital ads as an asset class. And just to quote from the white paper, what that means is providing standardized, fully integrated and verifiable digital ad inventory with a common liquidity framework. Could you explain a little bit, like for non-ad tech folks, what is it that means? Like this treating them as an asset class, like what does that mean?
Yeah, well, anyone that understands how financial market works, you understand there's buyers and there's sellers, and there's this structured marketplace in which buyers and sellers can interact. In the case of digital advertising, currently there's so much opacity, such a lack of regulation and really no common standards that these required elements aren't there, so it's hard for a proper market to function. Mm-hmm. As an example, if I were to go out and buy say, all of the inventory on every fantasy football app during the football season, because I know that's coming, right? We're in the heart of football season. I could go out and buy all of the inventory on every fantasy football app. There's no straightforward way for me to figure out how I would resell it to somebody in this common framework. There's no like NASDAQ of digital ads. Instead, there's these little fiefdoms that sell their own inventory. So what Exchange is all about is creating this common clearinghouse, right? Creating this standardized opportunity where buyers and sellers can transparently transact. So everything you know about the benefits of blockchain really applies to ads, right? They can be bought digitally, they can be sold digitally, they can be delivered digitally, and they can be measured digitally. And that's what Exchange does.
All right, so that's a really good explanation. Thank you. So let's fast forward a bit into the future. I'd love to hear your vision about how different ad tech stakeholders can benefit from Exchange, like all the way from advertisers to publishers to users. Like if Exchange really takes off and your wildest dreams come true, and we're a bit ahead in the future, like what changes can we expect in the advertising space?
Yeah, great question. I mean, clearly there are many that have no incentive or no motivation to make any changes, right? Companies like Google and Facebook who have the lion's share of revenue and on purpose make sure that there's really no transparency and no marketplace outside of the marketplace that they host. So they're actually incentivized not to make changes. But as you mentioned, there are hundreds of thousands of individual publishers that would love to make their inventory more available in an open and common marketplace. And there are thousands of advertisers that want to find new audiences, right? Fresh sources, extended reach, different ways of targeting and verifying audiences. And so what Exchange really does, right? The change from Exchange is that we benefit the natural market dynamics by creating this open, common marketplace for everybody to transact.
I see. And so you're in a way, it kind of decentralizes the ad market, right? It's removing gatekeepers, and it has this common language for people to interoperate and understand how they can expose, for example, a publisher inventory to a much larger audience other than, whichever integration you happen to build today.
100%. That's exactly right, Júlio.
All right. So something else that I really like about the white paper is that it anticipates cooperation and interoperability, for example, for data providers. And I'm wondering if you can share any thoughts on how you could see Fractal and Exchange play together here, given that we are about data provisioning.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Fractal, with what you guys have built, I mean, naturally, you guys know interesting things, interesting information about your audience, about your users. And that information can be signed in on the Exchange protocol into an insertion order. And it can be applied to an insertion order where a buyer and advertiser is really seeking to find those insights for an audience that they're specifically targeting, right? So the story here is Fractal doesn't have to, you don't have to own your own marketplace to provide value, right? The publisher bringing their inventory, they don't have to expose their first-party data to be able to better monetize their audience. All of this is done inside of the blockchain, inside of the smart contract, where cryptographically hashed identities from Fractal, from the publisher, can all be brought together, and the buyer then gets the benefit of having this data matching without anybody exposing the private information.
All right, understood. I'm really looking forward to seeing that work. Right. So, just to go back to Azeroth a tiny bit, you mentioned before that when you looked into this, there weren't really any good options in terms of public blockchains for you guys to use. So you built your own. Could you tell us a bit more about how Azeroth is different from other existing blockchain platforms? Yeah,
of course. I mean, I'm sure with enough money and enough time, you can build just about anything in software, right? We could have grabbed an existing platform and in some, Frankensteinian sort of way, appended an arm to a neck or something like that, and gotten close to what we needed from a term of performance and capabilities and functionality. However, we just felt it was more elegant to focus on building a platform specifically around our primary needs, and we needed fast finality, right? Think about the real-time nature of serving advertisements, digitally across web devices, mobile devices, connected TV, et cetera. We needed significantly high transaction volume, and we needed scalability. And so there wasn't anything out there, so we built our own to really handle these. We've got some really innovative ways of getting the performance that we need. And now that we're done with it, invariably we feel like other industries are going to value a blockchain with these kinds of performance capabilities as well.
All right, thank you. As anybody that's in the ad tech space will have noticed, there's been, a huge upheaval in the past year or a bit longer than that, with things like, for example, Google's move against third-party cookies and Apple's IDFA debacle. Where do you think that all of this is going, and how can Exchange play a role in this shifting ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that identity is at the center of any advertising targeting and measurement. And both Google and Apple are creating policy changes in an effort to protect the consumer. But it's clear to us that they're also really protecting their own interest, right? I mean, the biggest growth area that Apple has seen since the release of iOS 14.5, which is when app tracking transparency came into play, is in Apple search ads. They're pushing spend and discoverability over to Apple search ads. Equally, I mean, Google is limiting access to record level data. It's hard to get at record level data from Google now, but they have it. They're using it internally for themselves and certainly trying to push their own interest. So we feel like the benefit of an open protocol is really in allowing parties and counterparties to directly interact for buying and selling media. But we believe consumers also play a role in that. And there are a number of DLT solutions that provide consumer data sovereignty, exactly like what Fractal's building. So our opinion and our belief is that there's a much higher probability of folks like Fractal, the probability that you guys participate and succeed in an open protocol with Exchange is much higher than being successful, in the kind of current incumbent system dealing with Google and Facebook and Apple.
Yeah, like in terms of forward looking, if Exchange does become a success, if nothing else, it is going to essentially make it so that the industry isn't waiting to see what Google does next, what Apple does next, because that stops mattering, and it shouldn't matter. We shouldn't have a whole industry be dictated by, whatever a couple of folks think. And the market should surface the winners. And I think that an open protocol does exactly that. It's exactly how things should be. All right. So, bit of a different topic. So as you know, the internet was built without an identity layer, right? But identity is something that is pretty critical for some operations like payments or voting. And this doesn't need to be like your national election voting. It can just be a DAO, blockchain-based organization that for one reason or another requires mechanics such as one person, one vote. So identity can be pretty important, and as we move our lives to the digital sphere, that layer feels like it is missing. But on the other hand, anonymity and pseudonymity can be really important tools for people to express their true opinions. And maybe we don't feel that too much ourselves, but if you are unlucky enough to have a bit of an autocratic government, then this is something that is definitely going to affect you, right? So what is your view on the importance of digital identity, and how do we weigh this trade-off of the importance and relevance and necessity of you being identified with the problems that it also brings?
Yeah, this is a great question, Júlio. I'm actually going to turn this around. I'm super interested with what you guys have built on Fractal. I mean, you're the resident expert here. How would you answer this question?
Well, I think that this trade-off doesn't necessarily need to exist, especially if the user is in control of when to share their identity. And there are things that a user might want to do that require them to provide an identity, which, by the way, can be done without them revealing personal information. And that's the technology that we've built, and that is something that they can avail themselves of. And as long as you don't have like persistent identifiers that can be linked back to a person that are publicly available or much less on chain, then I think that this problem is very much mitigated. For most of your interactions with the web, you should definitely not be identified. For a lot of them, and for example, the attribution that we're talking about in ads, it is important that we know you are the same individual. Do not need to know who you are, right, for any reason. And there's a whole continuum here. And as long as the user is in control of what they get if they provide this versus that, I think that there's no trade-off here to be made. But we need to put the choice in the user's hand because, well, if it is elsewhere, then we're back to the trade-off.
And educating the user, right? Yeah, we're a similar mind there for sure, right? The right application needs to be applied with the right protocol, right? If you're transacting with PayPal and you're going to pay your friend $20 because you guys are splitting a pizza, you need to know who your friend is and that you're paying him and that transaction goes as planned.
Mm-hmm.
If you were surfing the web or skimming through social platforms, your identity is less important, and perhaps you don't even want to share your identity. So, totally agree with that. And hopefully there continues to be reputational impact given the context of usage, right? Like if somebody's out in the street, yelling out stock tips, you're unlikely to kind of listen to it and take that advice. Whereas, if you're, at a town hall and a community leader is up there, sharing his or her opinions about, what should be done, then you're going to be more thoughtful and reflective. So
yeah, I agree. It's really context dependent.
Yeah.
Right, Brian. So as a last question, if you had a magic wand and there was one thing that you could change overnight in the ad tech space, like what would it be?
Magic wand. How big is my magic wand?
As big as you want it to be.
Being in this industry and spending the last few years really focusing on the ad tech ecosystem, my magic wand, I would make it so that committing fraud in digital advertising would equate to committing fraud, securities fraud in finance, right? There just needs to be consequences for bad actors. And today it's not doable because of the opacity and just broken nature of the supply chain and the ecosystem. And I'm hopeful that Exchange can help to fix that.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. This has been a pleasure as always. I can't wait to see the next steps that we take together in the context of Fractal and Exchange and how we can connect those two and make sure that they can help each other out. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna ask you some more questions some other time again, but for now, this is it. So thank you very much for your time and have the rest of a great day.
Thanks, Júlio. My pleasure. Great to be with you.